Hello, welcome to this presentation regarding cage ladders in advanced steel. Let's start by introducing Greytech. So as you can see, Greytech are the ideal business partner to help you achieve your goals. Personally, my name is Alex Giles. I'm a structures consultant at Greytech, and as you can see from my bio here, I'm trained as a mechanical design engineer, and I've had roughly 20 odd years of experience in CAD support, consultancy and training, and I've spent the last 13 years using purely advanced steel, specializing in that only. This particular webinar is regarding cage ladders. So we're going to try and create ladders similar to the ones shown in the model there, and we're going to show you the correct settings, options and techniques and workflows to create those ladders as efficiently as possible. So those are the three ladders we're going to try and create. So thinking about the basic macro, how do you place the joint for the cage ladder in the first place? Well, the most important thing to get right before you even start the macro is the UCS. You must set the UCS correctly first. Z should be vertical, fairly obvious. But to get the cage on the correct size, you must point Y towards the climber, which ends up with X pointing left, as you can see in the picture on the right there. The start and end points should be selected on the wall or on the surface you're about to climb, not set forward. You'll set the ladder forward later as one of the options within the joint. The start point is always at the bottom and the end point is always at the top. The end point should be at the finished floor level for the exit level you want to climb off at. The cage will automatically extend above the exit level. So you can see the orange construction line in the image to the right. That's what you need to pick. And I find it helpful to draw the construction line to do that. It is impossible to move or rotate a ladder after it's created, not even using the transform elements or the advanced copy command as you might know it. Not even that will work. Nothing can change a ladder once it's created. Once you've got the UCS set correctly and you create the ladder with the macro, the key properties or parameters you need to set, first thing to check would be the height. In the UK build particularly, there is a library entry called default which overrides any height setting you choose when you place the ladder, and that's a bit annoying. So the first thing you have to do is go in and set the correct height. You also want to check the ladder width, which you can set the ladder to any width you like, but very often when you do change the width, the whole joint box goes red and the whole thing goes into an error state. And that's not because you've done anything wrong, that's because the size of the cage isn't suitable for the size or width of the ladder itself. And obviously the cage has to be wider than the ladder. So don't worry about that, just go ahead and fix the cage settings and all will come good again later. You can also activate additional rungs. It's very simple to add the additional rungs above the exit floor level, i.e. between the stringer at the exit portion, because you need these if you're going to climb off the ladder. Your feet are going to be at the exit level, your hands are going to be higher up, so they need something to hold on to. But when you're going to do that, obviously they're got the rungs between the stringers. You're not going to be climbing enough forward. You have to climb off to one side with a side exit. And I said you would move the ladder forward off the surface, off the wall, after you place it. So when you first place, it's going to be like the picture on the left there, embedded in the wall, because you haven't got any wall connection. But you go to the wall connection page in the joint, choose your settings they want there, and that moves the ladder forward. So now, as you can see on the picture on the right, the ladder has been moved away from the wall and can easily be climbed. You're going to have to manually add any required anchors or bolts, because the wall connection doesn't include anchors or bolts to the wall or supporting beams. They have to be put on yourself. So let's have a look at some of that in action. So here we are in Advanced Steel, and we're going to create our ladders. We already have the basic model with the construction lines set in the right places, so we can save time there. Now the important thing to notice is I want to put the ladder up this wall, and the construction line is directly flat on the wall. It's not moved forward or set off from the wall. Take care of that inside the macro later. The important thing though is that the UCS is in the right direction. It doesn't actually matter where the UCS is, just the orientation, but I will move it to the bottom of the construction line so it's easier for you to see what I'm talking about. So here it is. Now obviously Z's going to be pointing up the ladder. We need Y pointing towards the climber, so I'm going to be stood this side, so I need Y pointing this side. So I'll simply rotate the UCS for Y pointing this way, leaves X pointing left, and then I'll go and create my ladder. It's always the bottom point is the start point, and then the top point. And there we have a ladder. But as I say, in the UK we have this default entry in the library which overrides the height you've selected. So I just need to set the basic properties of the ladder straight away. So I'll set the correct height. I want a 1200 extension above the exit, and the width. Now when it comes to the width, as we say, if you change the width, it's quite possible that the whole ladder will go into an error state like this. The joint box has gone red, nothing makes sense anymore. It's not because you've done anything wrong, simply because the dimensions of the cage aren't large enough to cater for that width of a basic ladder. So we'll come back to that later. I'm just going to set it for 600 for now. And then we're going to go down to the wall connection page, and we want to set it away from the wall, because at the moment you can see it's embedded in the wall. So I'll choose any of the wall connection options. I like the folded plate option. And you can see that moves the ladder forward. We've got this value here. The wall distance tells you how far off it sets the ladder. Now I think I'll have 4 of these brackets in this case. I'm going to reduce that starting distance. Maybe I'm going to go to about 400 there. Yeah, that looks good. I don't have to adjust anything else because that's brought in a 4th one at the top just below the exit. That looks nice. Now notice that there are no anchors or bolts into the wall. You'll have to add them yourself later manually. And that's our basic ladder for starters. So then we move on to the cage, and when you think about the cage, there's 4 types of cage, or 4 shapes of cage available, as you can see in the image on the right. And they start counting at the bottom. So type 1 at the bottom is the rectangular cage. When you first choose that type particularly, it can look strange because all the bands, the vertical straps, are in the wrong positions and don't look right, but you have just got to move ahead and set the right settings. The other 3 types of cage are all circular hoops, but as you can see from the picture they have different ways of connecting to the stringer. So in terms of the macro, they use the word braces to refer to the hoops. I prefer hoops, but whatever. It's braces they use to refer to the hoops, and they use bands to refer to the vertical straps holding the braces together. So it's braces and bands, and it's all, until you get used to which way one they are, it's a bit confusing. The braces are the hoops. Let's see them cage in action. If you change the ladder width, like we said already, the whole joint can go red and go into an error state, and it's probably because the cage dimensions don't suit the size of the stringers. So if the stringers are too wide apart, the cage can't make it work. You have to adjust the cage dimensions. And most importantly, if it's a round cage, you're going to have to play with that value there highlighted in the box, number 2 radius, to get that so that the diameter of the cage is wider than the distance between the stringers. You're likely to also have to adjust the distance to center, so it's somewhere close to the radius. It doesn't want to be too much bigger or smaller because it doesn't make too much sense. So we've got our basic ladder, and now we want to look at the cage. So let's just come in with the type 2, but if I go to the cage page here, I set the type to none initially. You can see the picture there shows the 4 types possible. It starts counting at the bottom 1, 2, 3, 4. So I want a rectangular cage, so I'm going to go for type 1. When you first put that in, it looks a bit odd. These braces or bands aren't in the right positions and so on. So you just need to adjust the dimensions of that. So I'll go to the page and set up the dimensions. I'm going to have it 700 deep. I'm going to have it 1000 wide. But there's no bands in the right positions here. I need to set that one to 0 as well, otherwise this leg isn't in line with that leg for some reason, so I'll set that to 0. And now we can go to the bands. And we need to adjust the properties here. So on the straight part here, I want 2. And on the front part, I only need 3. And the spacing can be a bit bigger. So that looks reasonable to me now. We can be happy with that. So there we go, we've set the cage up to make some kind of sense. Now we think about the ladder exit, and there are 6 possible types of exit, 6 shapes of exit to choose from. The first one is what they call straight, so there's not really any special exit, it's just the stringers continue going past the exit. Then you've got type 2 where the exit flares open, flares wider. Type 3 gets wider and leans back. Type 4, you've got a hook over the top, but the down part of the hook is vertical, but the front is flared. Type 5, you have a hook and the down part is flared as well as the front part of the hook. And type 6, the stringers stay parallel, but they step outwards, as you can see, to get to a wider width to make it easier to climb off. And that's probably the one I would think is more likely to use most of the time. But notice something significant. Anything but the first one, straight exit, or the exit cage disappears. It's not possible. This is a major limitation of this macro. It's not possible to have an exit cage if the exit isn't set to straight. So that's a bit of a problem. We'll show you how to overcome that and how to work with that later on. On type 6, I think that's one of the most common varieties. But when you get to the exit dimensions, trying to set the size of that, you're probably going to want to set the value for side bending to be by distance rather than by an angle, because if it's an angle you can't control the overall width properly, so by distance means you can control that overall width much easier. We also want to look at the cage or the ladder exit, so go back into the ladder page, go to ladder exit, and we have a variety of choices here. I don't want straight, I'm going to go this time for a type 4, and that has this exit getting wider and leaning back, but the rear portion is vertical like so. So that's fine. Now I need to put in some decent looking dimensions for that. So I can go to the exit dimensions and make sure the height is right. I want the height. So first of all, we're saying the ladder extension is 1200, it goes 1200 above the exit level. But on this page, you got number 2 is how high this bend is from the exit. Some of the number 4 there, and then we got how high above that, so they add up 200 and 1000 adds up to 1200. Want these back legs to reach the bottom, so they need to be 1200, so number 7 is the back length, so that'd be 1200 like so. Now that reaches the ground as well. Now going to the width of that, it's telling me at the moment it's bending out by an angle 5 degrees. That's not really much use to me. So I'm going to change that. I can't really control how wide it is at the top then. So I'm going to change it from angle to distance. The main ladder was 600. So if I go 100 either side, that makes the overall ladder 800 at the top. And we can work with that. So there we have the exit as well. Having done that lot, we can now move on to the rung connection. So there are 3 ways you can connect the ladder rungs to the stringers. First of all, you've got flush, and if you look carefully here, This is a plan view. We've got a circular stringer tube, and we've got the rung here, and the rung is scalloped around the tube to fit tight to it. That's flush, a shaped cut. Or you can have straight, where it just simply cuts the rung off square and it just butts up against the stringer. In this case, we've got gaps created by that, so we'd have to fill out those gaps here and here using weld or something. The third type is extended, where you add an extra length to the rung and it goes through a hole in the stringer. It makes a hole in the stringer. So that might work lovely for this, or on that one, if you've got flats for the stringers, you can extend it outside beyond the flat, so you've got weld around the outside. But although that might seem promising, the one thing you can't do with that option is this. Using that option, there's no way to achieve a little small recess where you put the weld in the recess there. So if you extend the rung, it has to either go all the way through or beyond. If you stop short, the hole is a blind hole, which is no good to you. So you won't be able to quite do this result, but I'll show you now how you can. What you need to do is create that result manually. So if you set the extension on side 1, which is how much you add to the length of the rung, to equal the thickness of the stringer, and then that will put a hole all the way through the stringer with the rung ending flush on the outside. Then you can add a manual shorten to each end of the rung just by 2 or 3 mil or whatever, so that it sits as a recess. And then you can copy that, shorten around to the other rungs you need. And because the shorten belongs to the rung, if the spacing of the rungs or anything else should change with the rungs later on, hopefully, or most of the time, that shorten will follow those rungs around, so you don't have to redo them. Let's see that. So coming on to the rung connection then, first of all, let's make sure we get the rungs in the right spacing, because they're not quite what I'd like at the moment. It's a bit of an odd gap at the top. So I'm going to go to the rung distances page, and I want them to be 250 on the bottom and 250 between them, which does divide into the 5 meter height, so I get an equal height all the way up. Now if I zoom in, at the moment the rung just butts up to the inside of the stringer and is cut off there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the rung connection page. I'm going to change that to extended. And it's not actually extending at all yet because the distance is 0, so I need to tell it how far to extend. So if I said like 15, it would extend all the way through the stringer and stick out the outside. It might be a good option, you could weld around the outside. If you want to keep the outsides flat so you have no protrusions, I'm going to actually say I should extend 10, because you can't go less, so we won't just do a blind hole. So I'm going to go 10, and that's as much as I can do in the macro. But then I need to add a shorten to the rung. Just an ordinary shorten of 3 mil, and that takes the beam back inside the hole. So I'll do the same on the other end as well. Now I've got those two shortens, I need to copy those to all the other rungs. So I can't really see them. Let's go to 2D wireframe, and I can make a pattern of those. So let's use transform elements, or advanced copy as you might know it. And I'm just going to do those two shortens, and I want 19 copies of them with a 250 vertical spacing. I can check that with a preview. Looks like it's doing the right thing. Okay. Go back to realistic. You see how all the rungs now have that little recess all the way up to the top. So it's quite straightforward. It is a bit of a pain having to do it manually, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, so moving on now, you can do more things with the cage. Let's look at the cage in a bit more depth. One thing that's possible to do with the cage is create the bottom rings to be wider than all the others. It's often quite desirable to have this tapered entrance to the cage. Makes it easier to climb and more comfortable to get into. So you can create this flared bottom. Well, to do that, you have to set the cage general first brace option to the desired cage type, not to the same as others. So this option here, first brace, set that to the required type. And then once you've got that, you can adjust the properties or the dimensions and size of that hoop on those first bottom brace pages. At the exit of the ladder, you can only have a cage on the exit if the exit is set to straight. I'll show you a workaround for other situations later. But with the exit straight, you can have the exit cage, and the exit cage could be a different shape to all the other cages if you want to, but I don't really know why you'd want to have the exit cage a completely different shape. But the chances are you will want to adjust the dimensions a little bit, or maybe, as you can see on the picture, you have an exit on the side, the left or the right. So if you got the ladder exit set to straight, then you can't get through between the stringers. You're probably going to want to step off the side of the ladder, which is what we're showing in the picture there. You can only have a different cage on the various levels at the exit if you say finish cage at exit level. So see in the dialog box on the general page, the cage, we got finish cage at exit level, and we've got to tick that so they only have control over the exit cage. And then you go and set the type for the exit cage under exit to the desired type. Again, it could be a completely different type, but you wouldn't want that. Even if it's the same type, you have to set it to the right type so you can control the dimensions separately. And then when I've got an exit to the side, like you can see, we have this thing here, an exit post. So to get that exit post in the right position, we need to adjust the values called 11 dimension 1 or 12 dimension 2, not very helpful names, on the brace dimensions page. And adjusting those two will get the exit post there in the right position so that you can bolt it to the supporting structure. So you can see there I've highlighted those dimension 1 and 2 in the dialog box. Dimension 1, importantly, must be less than the total of number 1 distance to center and number 2 radius. So in this case that's 400 there, 450 there, so 950. This 850, sorry, that would have to be 850 or less. They're generally less than 850, or it will give an error. The other details about the exit you can play with on the exit opening post page. You want to change the section size or whatever. You're going to want to bolt that or anchor that into the wall or to a supporting beam. I'm afraid once again you have to add those bolts or anchors manually yourself outside the ladder macro. Let's take a look. Alright, now let's have a more in-depth look at the cage then and set up what we've just discussed. So I'm going to do that with a new ladder. I'm going to put it on this construction line, so just to make things clear, I'll move my UCS to the bottom of that construction line and rotate it the right way, because this time I'm climbing up from this side of the ladder. And I'll create the ladder from the bottom to the top. Set all those basic properties again. So 5,000 high. 600 wide. Oh, sorry. 1200 extension. 600 wide. Okay. So that's the basic ladder in there. Now we're going to go to the cage and look at the cage. So the first thing we're going to do is get this bottom bit flared. So we're just going to check the dimensions, and we can see that the cage is working fine. It looks of a decent size. It's 350 and 370, the distance center and the radius. So I want to make the bottom two wider than that. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to go to that general page, and the first brace, it's going to be the same shape, so you could think same as others are right, but it can't change the dimensions then. So I need to change that first brace to the actual type, which will be type 2. And that means I can now adjust the dimension of that first one differently. And I want to set up a double hoop at the start to give the extra reinforcement there. That's good. When it gets to brace distances, I don't want such a big gap between or such a big taper. I only want this first one lower down nearer the opening. So I'm going to have a distance to the first brace will be different. Let's move that first one down. I don't want 300 in there. I want that to be a bit bigger, so I'm going to make it 400. like so. So we've got a decent gap there. Now, I don't want to change those dimensions of all the hoops, just the bottom 1 or 2. That's under first bottom brace dimensions. I'm going to make them 450 and 470. So we've got that larger hoop on those bottom 2 positions. Okay, so now we're going to come up to the top of the ladder. We've got our flared cage at the bottom, that's lovely. At the top we need to do a decent exit. Now I'm going to go out the side of the ladder this time onto the platform, and if my feet are going to be at this level I need handholds higher up, so I'm going to put extra rungs in. But again, before I do the extra rungs I need to get the basic rungs the right spacing, so let's go straight under the rung distances and get those basic rungs the right spacing. That's the first lot, and then I can go to the additional rungs page and activate the additional rungs and choose the spacing I want there. It shouldn't really change from the first lot, so I'll give it the same spacing like so. So that's got the rungs here for handholds going up. Now I can put the exit on the cage. First of all, I need to look at the cage here. To put a different exit cage on, the best thing to do is to tick this box saying finish cage at exit level, which makes the exit cage here separate to the main body. And then under exit I can choose the top cage and I can choose what I want. Now it does want to be the same shape again, so it's still type 2, but this time I want an exit climbing out this way, which is on the left. So it'll be type 2 left exit. There we go. Now I've only got the band here, or the brace here and the brace here. I want more than that, so let's adjust those. Instead of saying distance between, I'm going to just tell it I want 3 braces. That's better. Now the top one, if you have a look, is above the stringer there, so I need to move the top one down a bit. Fine. Then I want to move the bottom one up so it's clear of the platform here. So I'm going to move the bottom one up, say 100. That looks decent. Now to get this bar here in the right position, all the dimensions you need are on the brace dimensions page, and if you look at the pictures carefully you can see it's numbers 11 and 12. So as we say, number 11 here, how far or how wide this opening is, must be less than the total size of the cage. So that from the rungs to here is 350 plus 370, that's 720. So this value must be less than 720. If I do 700, it's happy. If I do 750, it all goes into an error and the joint box goes red. So 700 is the answer I want. Happy with that. To get it in the right distance this way, across this way, you might have to measure it yourself. I can't really easily see what the datum for 0 is. So I happen to know that the right value in this case is 135. And there you go, it's moved it out a bit. So now it's just touching the edge of the platform, and I would have a railing or supporting beam or something in there that could bolt onto. Again, there's no bolts into the member, you have to add those manually. But there's a ladder, more interesting ladder with a flared bottom cage and a side exit properly created. Okay, so we've been promising a workaround. What happens when the ladder exit isn't straight? So I think the most common way to exit a ladder is forwards at the top rung, like we show in the picture here, and that probably use exit type 6. So when you got an exit like that, what would you do? Well, I would suggest you model the main ladder first, and you set everything up saying finish cage at exit level, and you set everything about the ladder as you wish, and you set up the ladder exit as you wish. That's the stringers. But then to get the cage, what I would suggest is you create another ladder nearby with exactly the same general configuration, but you have the same width all the way up. So whatever the exit width on your main ladder is, you set the full width of the temporary ladder to that same all the way up. Keep the exit straight, so there's no a straight exit, but the width is wide all the way up. Then you do split cage at exit level, and you adjust all that exit cage as you need to get the exit cage looking lovely how you want it. Then you simply need to copy the braces, that's the hoops, from the temporary ladder to your original one. and then you can delete the temporary ladder after you've done that, and then you adjust the bands on the original ladder, and shorten at UCS is the easiest way to do that. So let's see that in action. So like we say, the most common exit you want is probably going to be a straight exit or a type 6 exit where it's parallel beams, parallel stringers, and you step forward off the ladder. But the cage disappears when you do that, so let's see how we create that manually as we've just talked about. So once again, I'm going to go back to world coordinates this time just to prove it doesn't matter where the UCS is. Rotate it so it's pointing this way, and I'm going to create a new ladder on this new construction line. Once again, set the basic dimensions. Like so. And what we want to do, let's get the wall connection. There we are. And I've got the basic ladder done. We need to make the cage here. We want the same cage all the way up, really. So we're going to make this cage wide enough or large enough to accommodate the exit as well. So the cage dimensions I'm going to use, go to brace dimensions. I'm going to use 450 for the center distance and 500 for the radius. Quite a large cage. It's got to cater for quite a large exit. But now we're going to change the exit. So ladder exit, I'm going to change that to type 6. And the exit cage vanishes. Now we've got the exit, we've got the parallel beams, but we've got these these angled pieces here. And if we look on the exit dimensions page, they're being controlled by angle, but no idea what width that is, that's not much use. I'm going to change that to distance. If I had 100 either side, that makes the overall width 800. Like so. The offset from the level, I need to reduce that to more like 50, I don't want it too high up. And then that needs to be 1150 above that to keep the 1200 exit, top height of the exit that I want. So I've got the basic ladder now, but I've got no exit cage. So how do I create the exit cage? Well, like we say, best thing to do is create another ladder identical nearby. Fastest way to do that is to use join copy. So join copy there, and it doesn't really matter where I put it. That'll do. I've got a ladder. Now I can adjust this new ladder. I'll go into the properties to make it the same width all the way up. The width of my exit. So the overall width all the way up will be 800. And the ladder exit will be straight. So now I've got something here over the exit. But what I need to do is make sure that I have a separate cage for the exit. So under cage, I'll tell it to finish cage at exit level, which means I can create a cage just at the exit. Then under the exit group for the top cage, instead of saying same as other, I'll make it a separate type 2. The joint box has gone red again because when you do this, it uses old dimensions, so the brace dimensions need to be updated. That was 450 and 500. And let's make that 0 there. We need to put more bands in. So if I go to the top cage page, I don't want to do the distance between again. I want to change that to the number of braces, set that to 3. And I've got, if not careful, it's going to be doubling up here. So again, the top one, if you look, it's going above the stringer. So I want to offset that first and last one. So the top one needs to be -30. Now the bottom one, at the moment, is sort of here. I don't want it here. I want to move it up so it's onto the wider part. So that was 50 plus a bit going sideways to the 100 mil. So I'm going to move it up a bit more than that. I'm going to move it up 200. Now we've got our 3 braces for the exit cage. So I've got all that. I can close that down now, and I just do a copy. But before I do the copy, I want to make sure that it's going to take the welds with me. So I'm going to go into the advanced copy or transform elements and make sure include additional connections is ticked there. If it is ticked, that's good. I can cancel that. And even though I cancelled, that tick still applies to all of these other 8 commands underneath. So when I use this ordinary copy command here, it will still take the additional connections. So I want to take those 3 hoops or braces. Now I want to use the top of the stringer as a reference from there to there. And just put them in place over here. And the welds have come with it. So now all I need to do is adjust the bands. So the easiest way to do that is to put my UCS on top of the hoop. That'll do. And then do a shorten that UCS on the bands, because I don't know what the distance is, but that works out the distance for me. Like so. I don't really want to see those green features, so I'll select those 5 bands and turn off the features, set them back to a standard presentation. I just need to check that ladder is all one piece, so I use the mark objects disconnected in shop, and there we go, the whole ladder is indeed one piece. So all one assembly. I can delete this temporary ladder now, and my job's complete. That's all very well when you got an exit type 6, but what happens if you have a different type of exit where it's tapering? Well, I'm afraid there's not really any really clever trick for doing this, but the general gist is much the same. You'll probably still have to manually create the cage. Well, you will have to manually. You probably still want to just copy the braces up from the main ladder and adjust the bands as necessary, and maybe adjust the fitting onto the main ladder. So what happens when you don't have a parallel exit? Well, on our first ladder we got this exit type 4, which is a tapering exit. So let's try and work out what happens there. Well, it's the same idea. You've got to copy some braces, make sure you've got braces in all the positions, then it's just simply extend the bands. So I'm going to copy these braces up. Just the top line will do. I'll guess some distances, so maybe something like 400, 800 and 1200. That'll do. So I'm going to get away with it on the depth. Just going to trim the face off. So what I'm going to do, UCS object in there. Choose string that. And like there as we want. So the UCS is on the surface there. Now I can shorten that UCS. And these objects. So same on this side. UCS object. Do that one there. Shorten UCS on this side. And again, I can set those to be standard presentation so I don't see the green cuts. Get my UCS on top of the brace so I can extend the bands, and again that's a UCS, shorten a UCS to extend them. I'm on the bottom. top, short UCS for the bands. Like so, and again, don't want to see the green features, so I'll set the bands to standard presentation. Check the whole thing's one assembly. There we go. So with a bit of improvising you can create your cages. They're not the end of the world. It depends on how elaborate your exit is and how much adjustment the cage connection wants, but as long as you've allowed for it when you create the initial cage, it's not that bad. Finally, I'd like to remind you about the library, so that all things being equal, I reckon you generally create your ladders the same way. Unless there's some special circumstance or a picky client that needs a certain thing, you're going to do your ladder the same every time. Certainly the exit is almost certainly to be the same every time, and so is the exit cage. So you can use the library to store these favourite settings. Make a library entry for the general ladder with the exit as you want it, and then make another matching library entry with the exit width all the way up and the exit cage fully set up. And then you just create one of each ladder and just adjust the height on the main ladder really to get that right. Might have to adjust one or two other vertical dimensions, but mostly it's just the height overall. And then you can simply create another ladder with the cage configuration and copy the hoops across very quickly. So let's just see that going now. So what we've shown you so far is the long way of creating the cage manually, but of course it's probable that most of the time your exit on the ladder will always be the same unless there's a special situation. Probably most of the ladder will be the same except for the height. So we can set most of this up as a library entry. So instead of having to create all that long-winded manual way, I'm going to take that away. Take away these hoops we did before. And we'll do it now using a library instead and see how much quicker this is. So here we go. I'm just going to go back to world coordinates and make sure my orientation is correct. Create a ladder on this position. Now I go to my library and I choose my basic ladder setup. There we go, we have a ladder. Now you're not going to have to change very much, mostly just the overall height. You might need to adjust things like the wall connection spacings and things, but just a couple of vertical dimensions is all you're going to really need to change. And that's got the basics there. Then I can do any other ladder nearby. And this time from the library I choose my exit cage configuration. That's all created for me, so I simply need to do that copy, those top three bands, or braces I should say, from the top of the stringer there to the top of the stringer here. And delete that temporary ladder now. Got my UCS. Top of the brace and extend the bands. Hide the features. Check it's all one assembly. Everything's gone red. So happy with that. And I've created the whole ladder in under 2 minutes. So that's pretty efficient. Once you get the hang of it, then you set up some library entries. So there you go. We hope that's been interesting for you and useful, and demystified some of the settings, shown you how you can use some of the power that is in there. It's a major failing that it can't do the exit cage for you, but I've shown you some workarounds for that, how you can create a suitable exit cage, hopefully pretty simply, but also how to get the most out of the rest of the macro so you can really achieve the majority of your ladder in super quick time. Thank you for your attention. I hope that's been useful.